For some reason, this rematch hasn't really captivated me. Golovkin Canelo 2, Canelo Golovkin 2, whichever way round you want to put it. Up until this point, it hasn't captivated me, even when the initial date was made for May 2018 and that fell through. I was just like, shrugging my shoulders at it. But at this point, I'm actually quite intrigued about this rematch now. Now I'm starting to get interested. There's a couple of reasons for that, one of which I'll cover in a separate video because it's a topic all in itself. But the other reason is because of the fact that there's pressure on Canelo in more ways than one. And there's also pressure on Golovkin. Let's talk about Golovkin first. Why is there pressure on Golovkin? Well, Golovkin is saying that Canelo's not a heavy puncher. He said it's hard to remember after a year all this time, but from what I remember, he didn't surprise me as being a heavy puncher. He's not a very heavy puncher at all. I don't think I need to change anything. It's their team that has to practically change everything. I don't think about him. I don't think about how it's going to be. Right now, there is a lot of talk back and forth. It's for the promotion. You will see what happens on September 15th. Everything will be clear. He goes on to say, if you listen to what they say, I appear not to be a boxer at all. What's interesting is why they didn't win the fight the first time. Alright, so those are the words of Triple G Gennady Golovkin. Now, why is this interesting to me? Because Golovkin was outboxed in several rounds in the first fight. Now, whether you think Golovkin did enough to win, or whether it was a legit draw, or whether Canelo won, that's not what I'm trying to contest at the moment. All I'm trying to tell you is Canelo did win rounds in the fight, yes? And he won the rounds by outboxing Golovkin. That's what he did. Golovkin, from what I saw in the first fight, he cannot outbox Canelo. Canelo is faster, he's more athletically gifted, and he's a more skilled boxer. Golovkin looked rudimentary. He looked quite crude against Canelo. Boxing is about levels. And from what I saw in that first fight, Canelo's on a different level to Golovkin in terms of skill. But Golovkin has strength. He's got punching power. He had work rate in the first fight. He was relentless. The reason why this is intriguing to me is because there's pressure on Golovkin to start earlier in the fight, to try and either stop Canelo or make it such a clear victory that they can't take it from him on the cards. So that pressure that Golovkin started putting on Canelo in the mid-rounds, he has to now do that from the early rounds. From the first bell, really. He needs to be on Canelo's case. And that makes for a more exciting rematch. The fact that he feels he's got to do that. Another thing which makes it interesting is Canelo. Because Canelo, as we all know, has had stamina issues throughout most of his career. So if Golovkin is starting earlier and putting more pressure on Canelo early, and Golovkin says Canelo ain't a big puncher, how's Canelo going to respond to that? Is Canelo going to box the same way as he did in the first fight? I think he will. I think he has to. All I'll say is, I think he should push home his advantage a little bit more. But I'll cover that in a separate video because it might be more difficult for him to do it in the rematch. And when I mean push home his advantage, I mean there were moments in the first fight where Canelo was able to push Golovkin back and hit him with some nice shots when he was pushing him back. And he was able to push him back relatively easily when he decided to come forward. So, and I felt like he didn't maintain the pressure on Golovkin when he should have. I think he could have got Golovkin in trouble if he'd maintained the pressure. Particularly to the body. If you can't hurt Golovkin to the head because he's got an iron jaw, hit him in the body. I think that might be where you could get him. Golovkin's been looking like he's been enjoying his rest period in the photos I've seen of him recently. You know, he's been looking kind of tubby. Whereas Canelo's been looking in shape for a long time. So, yeah, it's intriguing because there's going to be pressure on Canelo. How's he going to keep Golovkin off if Golovkin starts earlier? There's a certain amount of pressure on him to deliver a more decisive performance. Although I think people underestimate the fanaticism of a lot of Canelo supporters. To us hardcore fans and us impartial fans, we might think that Canelo needs to redeem himself after the failed doping tests and the inconclusive nature of the first fight. But in the eyes of the diehard Canelo fans, I don't think there's so much scrutiny being placed on him, to be honest with you. So yeah, I'm intrigued by the rematch. From a tactical point of view, I want to see how both guys approach it. It could end up being far better than the first fight. The first fight wasn't a bad fight. Well, it was nothing too memorable. It wasn't a bad fight. The second fight could actually be a lot better and a lot more dramatic for several reasons. You know, the reasons I've just stated, and also the fact that Canelo might not be as strong. He might be faster in the rematch, but he might not be as strong. Could his stamina actually be better? I'm going to cover that in a separate video when I talk about the other reason why this fight is now intriguing me. Alright? So drop your comments in the comment section below. Let me know how you feel about this particular fight. Are you interested now in Canelo Golovkin 2? Has this fight got your attention? Do you think, like me, that it could turn out to be a more dramatic fight than the first fight? Who are you picking as a winner? Are you picking someone by knockout this time around? Apparently, I saw some Dwyer video, and he says that certain bookmakers, or in America, I believe people call them sports books, were offering incredible odds, an incredible over-under of 11.5 rounds, which means, you know, very good odds if you bet on a knockout happening in the fight within the first 11.5 rounds. So the bookies clearly think this fight is going to go the distance again. And certainly from a defensive point of view, Canelo didn't really have too much trouble with Golovkin. Golovkin was never able to catch Canelo with very many clean punches. Because Canelo, people say he was running, but it's not just the fact he was moving around. Even when Canelo was relatively stationary on the ropes, which is something he often likes to do in fights, Golovkin couldn't land anything clean on him. When he would throw a right hand, Canelo would turn his head to take the sting off the punch. You know, he's still going to have them same skills in the rematch. So, anyway, let me know how you feel about this particular fight. It's happening, I'm out.